Right, guys, welcome back to episode 4 of the Up Podcast
2.0.
2.0. Today's guest is arguably one of the most famous and well-known MMA coaches in the world. Most of you will know him for being the head MMA coach of the one and only Conor McGregor. Today we're joined by John Kavanagh. We hope you enjoy. Touch on some interesting topics. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment. And we will see you next time. Enjoy the video.
Some man they wanna chat shit till I knock 'em, ain't like I'm Jack Shaw. Rolls hat, rolls back, my flow sharp like a hacksaw.
Well, we're joined by one of the most famous, I think, and most successful coaches to ever come out of Europe, if not the world, Mr. John Kavanagh. Thanks for coming on, John.
It's a pleasure.
You know, this is our 4th podcast,
Yeah.
so we're really pleased to have you on. I'm going to kick it off with tell us a little bit about your early days. How did SBG Ireland start? You know, when did you go from being a competitor and thinking I want to get into that coaching role?
Yeah, so back in the VHS days of watching UFCs, same old story. Just start playing around with a couple of friends. I'd done some karate as a kid. I never really thought it was real. I'd seen street fights and I'd seen the kind of techniques I was doing in karate, and I didn't see the crossover. I didn't think it would really work. And then watching UFC 1, watching Heist be able to control, big, strong, tough guys, I recognized right away that he wasn't just using, raw power or anything like that. He wasn't overpowering people. It looked like a very sort of step-by-step process. And literally the next day, I started trying to bend my poor brother's arm in different ways till he screamed. And I went, oh, that's an arm lock. So yeah, look, a lot of trial and error. I certainly enjoyed the process, but it was slow. I look back now, and I'm sure you guys see the same, where we can get someone in 6 months or 12 months. Like if they'd have been competing 15 years ago, they'd have been gods.
Yeah. I say this to a lot of people. The level now of even, particularly in Ireland and Wales, the amateur scene is phenomenal now. And I've got amateurs that 10 years ago would have been world champions on a lot of the organizations. And I think it's probably the same with you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people, go watch an IMAFs and you're going to see the
Yeah.
scary level of these 15, 16, 17-year-olds. They're all doing MMA from day one. They didn't come from different sports, and it's very exciting time. I think like myself, I study you guys a lot, and you seem to have a real attraction towards the technical side of things. So I'm always stealing your moves as well. I'll be honest. But to see that level worldwide, and I do think in particular the UK and especially the Welsh scene and the Irish scene, the level these guys are having to be at to be successful on the amateur scene is
Yeah, agreed.
it would be incomprehensible 15 years ago that's what you had to be. There
Yeah.
are 16-year-olds are actually training like the way the pros did 10 years ago. They're all on top of nutrition now. They're all making weight the right way. They're all know how to strike and grapple. So it's very cool. So, but just going back to myself, how I actually came across SBG was I got an offer of a fight in South Africa in 2000. So, Jesus, what's that, 25 years ago
25
now?
years, mate. Yeah.
And it was really cool. I got Forrest Griffin was the main event on it, so I got to meet Forrest and Rory Singer. You guys might know him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Matt Thornton was actually in the corner of my opponent at the time. And Matt's not exactly the smiliest, most approachable guy, even on the best of days. But he was giving me. I thought he was scowling at me, but he was just being Matt. And I got my ass royally whooped in that fight. And the next day I went. There was a seminar on, and with a concussion and a broken nose, I thought it'd be a good idea to go and train 3 hours. But I hit it off with Matt. And in 2001, I brought him to Ireland for his first, seminar there. And was in a little shed. There was about 20 of us. And at the end of it, I said to him, I'm really sorry, but I can't actually afford to pay you anything. But I'll show you a good time. Took him out in Dublin on a few nights, and we hit it off. Very good friends since. And that's when I switched from, I think at the time I was called the Real Fight Club, about the dumbest name you could have for an MMA club. And we switched to SBG Ireland, and the rest is history, as they
The
say.
rest is history. When you like, obviously, I've known of you since the early days because I'm a bit older than yourself, John, but I think we were around at the same sort of time. I remember you competing on the circuit. At what point did you think, you know, you believed, you know, that self-belief where you could have been a really successful coach? Because I've seen some fantastic competitors over the years that just haven't got that ability to transfer it into a coaching role, you know. And I think we've all seen that in all sports, football, rugby. Fantastic players have tried their hand at management and coaching and have never been successful. Obviously, with yourself, you know, your statistics and your track record, second to none. But at what point did you think, you know what, I think I could give this a go and be successful?
When that date comes about, I'll definitely let you know. I
Good
still very
answer.
much have it. I still very much have imposter syndrome. I won't lie.
Yeah.
I'm still shocked that the gym is full, and I'm still get a little bit overwhelmed walking out for big fights. So, but I don't know if that's a negative. I think it's good to stay that way. It's good to stay. I'm always worried that I'm not giving my guys the best information. You know, I'm always chasing. I'm always looking for the next little 1% gain, whether it's on the psychological side of things, certainly the nutrition side of things. And then, like I said, technically, you know, I'm always studying. I'm always trying to make sure we have the best information. So I very much don't feel that way. We've had our ups and downs, like I suppose, like any team. But yeah, when that comes about, you'll be the first to know.
I'll take that as a diplomatic answer, which I wouldn't expect in your review. But there must have been some point in your career where you thought, I'm going to transfer over to becoming a coach, and I'm going to give this coaching. You know, what sort of period was that? Right, I'm going to give this a go and become a full-time martial arts coach.
Yeah, I feel I was very lucky that I did have, like, I was pretty obsessive about the sport. Certainly in my 20s and 30s, like, I couldn't think of anything else. I was terrible on the business side of things. My sister ran the gym at the time, and it was a good month if we were less than 2,000 in debt. I always remember that number because I had a 2,000 euro overdraft with the bank, and I'd always just about get to that. And my sister be wagging her finger, like, you're gonna need to do this and do that. And I would just, I don't care. I just want to, this arm lock, I can't fucking figure out, how do I do this arm lock? So that was, I was very obsessive like that. And then I had a bunch of people kind of join around about the same time. Obviously, Conor's the big name, but I had between like Paddy Houlihan and Cole Pendred and Chris Fields, Ashling Daly, Philip Mulpeter. I had this 10 or 12 people that seemed to be as obsessive as me and didn't mind the extra sessions and didn't mind coming in the weekends. And we all just sort of fed off each other. And the scene back then was obviously a lot smaller, but we were kind of quickly dominating the Irish scene, which, you start getting momentum, you start getting that little bit of confidence. I think at one stage we maybe had 3 or 4 of the Cage Warriors belts, which was, kind of the big one on the UK scene. So I suppose you start getting, a bit of confidence that the results are coming. I still was thinking we're way off, international scene. We're way off, UFC or anything like that. Right from the start, Conor was talking about winning a UFC belt. And I was like, well, I'd like to get to the UFC. That Jesus, if we achieved that on our first outing, Tom Egan, he fought, he was the first guy, well, actually the second guy I cornered in the UFC, but I was kind of only what would you say, a second or third level corner man.
Who was the first?
Sammy Chavo.
Sammy Chavo, yeah.
So that was the first time, but his brother was kind of running things. I was just there to help. And then, Conor went in and all of a sudden it's like you start realizing, hey, everybody puts on their trousers one leg at a time. These are just human. And I probably had in my head as well about the weight cutting thing. All these guys are going to be enormous. And then we're standing beside them. It's like, they're just men. They're just, they're similar size and they both have 2 arms, 2 legs, and we can do okay there. So probably, I would put it down to, that's certainly that run from Conor, and it gave myself confidence that what we're doing was working, and it gave the rest of the team confidence. And then that starts to snowball.
And I think you probably, those guys you mentioned, there was like a real golden era of a breakthrough. Everybody remembers Conor, but I remember little things as a young man at the time getting into coaching. I remember being on a London card and you were there with Pendred fighting for the world title. And I always remember asking, Jesus Christ, John, how much weight does he cut? What does he come in on the next day? You probably don't remember, Scott, I remember it quite vividly. I remember you saying he's going to be about 92 kilogram on the day. I'm like, what? And he's waiting at 7. And I always remember you guys bringing in your own food and giving it to the chef to prepare for you. And as a young aspiring coach, those are the little things I remember thinking, right, I need to concentrate on nutrition a bit. I need to work out of this weight kit and business. As you said there, when you get to that bigger stage, it's not as overwhelming as you think, is it? Like you said, there's a bit of imposter syndrome as you get in there. We good enough? Making it there then and thinking, oh, am I going to be able to be successful in this organization? But I'm not going to ask you much on Conor, because you probably had it many times. But with Conor, obviously, I think he set the stall out, not just for Ireland, but the entire world on how to the mental approach, the mental games, everything else. How long was he training with you when you thought to yourself, I've got something special? Because
I want to just chime in there as well.
Yeah.
I remember being I was like a proper Cage Warriors nerd, so I always remember the SBG gym. Like you said, Penrith, Paddy, Chris Fields, and they were all top level. And I always remember I just got on Twitter and I remember seeing Conor when he knocked the guy out with the elbows on the cage in Cage Warriors, and I remember thinking, then, oh, this guy looks good. I remember following on Twitter, and like a lot of people remember it when Conor got the UFC and he blew up. But I always remember watching him on Cage Warriors, and he won the both belts. And how much, like you said, how much did he how long was it before you sort of thought? Because you could see straight away in Cage Warriors he was a different level of talent to the guys he was fighting. They were on the European and the UK level, whereas he was very obviously world class even back then. How like you say, how long into training, Conor, did you start to think, this guy's a little bit different from the others that he's fighting and the others that I coach?
Yeah, I suppose there's not one instance. There's a few little things that pop out in my head. The funny one about that one, the elbows on the cage, I'll always remember that the fight before us, a guy had won or, had done a lot of damage with that same movement. And Conor was watching it on the screen and he said, I'm going to do that. And we hadn't actually, at that time, it was kind of a newish tactic for defending on the fence.
Yeah.
So it literally, we hadn't trained it. I'd never done it. He watched it the fight before. He goes out and then he stopped the guy with those shots. There was something before that. I always remember there was a light heavyweight, and I think he was on the KSW scene, big Polish strong guy. And he had come by the gym, and Conor wasn't training all that long. And Conor goes, put me with him. And I was like, well, 100 kilos, he was cutting down to light heavyweight. I said, and I'm talking to the other fella saying, now take it easy. You're a pro fighter. Conor was an amateur. 30 seconds later, the guy's on his back looking up at the ceiling. And I was like, whoa, that's not usual. This is when Conor was probably barely 70 kilos. So he certainly had power.
Yeah.
I've for 20 odd years trying to discover the technique, and I've sort of come to the realization that you're born with it. I think the best boxing coaches in the world can help you develop it, but I do think it's a touch you have or you don't. He can talk, he has that charisma around him, and loved performing. I think that's a big one. I certainly, the little bit of competition I did, I never really enjoyed performing. I didn't care, about a crowd watching me. I enjoyed if the techniques worked, there was a satisfaction of like a sequence working, but it wasn't so much so that, to get the crowd going. He loved performing.
Yeah.
So I suppose it was kind of, doesn't take a genius to put together that if you've got someone that has charisma, can talk, loves performing, picks up techniques quite quick, is a great athlete to begin with. And I was always very as well open with my own vast limitations, that I had no problem bringing in a wrestling coach, bringing in other jiu-jitsu guys, bringing in, whoever it took. I sort of saw myself as a performance director, the guy that's sort of overseeing it.
Yeah.
But I knew I was very lacking in plenty of areas, and we could, around about that time, we had a big influx of Eastern European guys and Russians, and so we were very lucky. And Dublin seems to be a real stopping point for Americans. They come through Dublin to go on the rest of the way. So every other week we'd have, sometimes it was a UFC fighter coming through and saying, oh, I'm in town for a few days, can I come in and train? And you start seeing again, these guys are human. It does, you can work your techniques against them. So no real one instance, but certainly a few things like that in the gym. And then some of the performances, like you say there in the Cage Warriors, you go, wait a second, there's something here.
Yeah. You just touch on what you said there about you've brought in all these other coaches to complement yourself and your other promoter. Were you a one-man band at the very early days? Because this is how it was with us when we first started the gym back in 2008. I was taking the striking, I was taking the wrestling, I was taking the jiu-jitsu, I was taking the nogi, I was taking some S&C. But as the gym grew and as the competition level grew, I was open-minded enough to think, right, I need to get a boxing coach in, I need to get a wrestling coach in, I need to get a Muay Thai coach in. Where I think a lot of gyms with egos amongst the head coach, they're afraid to open their doors and say, come and show me something I don't know. Was it the same for yourself in the early days? You was doing everything?
Yeah, and I think I was a little bit lucky because when I started training jiu-jitsu, I would travel to England and I'd go to Hodgers up in Birmingham, or go to Carlson Gracie in London, or go into London Shoot Guys. And I think because I was like the little visiting paddy, no one took me all that serious.
Yeah.
But I would hear that there was and good competitive rivalry between the different gyms. But because of that competitive rivalry, you wouldn't really cross train. You wouldn't visit different gyms. If you were part of that team, you're part of that team.
Yeah.
Whereas tribal. I was able to kind of sneak underneath the radar and train with 5 or 6 different teams at the same time. And I'd certainly see the benefit of that. So I suppose early on I was learning that this is the way to do it. You want to go certain places that are specializing in certain areas. And I suppose I just carried that on as I continued. I just didn't see the negative side of that. I eventually you might end up facing someone out of that gym. In fact, you might have 2 teammates at some stage fighting, and that's just the nature of the sport. But certainly in the learning stage and the Monday to Friday training, I would, if someone had something to offer, great. And I should bring up at this stage as well that a big part of my development was who is now my co-head MMA coach was Dave Roach, and that might be a name yourself. You might have remembered him from. He didn't do a huge amount of fights, but we used to call him the Big Bad Wolf. He was extraordinary. I would still say probably the most talented natural fighter I've ever dealt with.
Yeah.
And what he was able to do early on especially with, I won't drop names, but with some big names coming through Dublin, and I've watched Dave quite manhandle some names that were still active at the time. Again, that's kind of adding to the confidence that actually we're doing some things here that can work.
Yeah. So your self-belief starts growing. The more success you're having, you're thinking, yeah, we do belong on these biggest stages. I am doing the right things as a coach. As you said, we're always, even as older guys now, we're still improving. We're still looking for techniques. We're still trying to improve ourselves in our coaching. One thing I think with your guys, and me and Jack visited Dublin in 2015, was it?
Yeah.
That show, we'd only had 8 fights, UFC Dublin at the time. I think Joe Duffy was going to fight Poirier,
yeah.
And then Paddy became main event because Joe had a concussion. And me and him was like, 8 fights. To date, what do we say?
Yeah.
The best atmosphere we have ever been on. And it was like a mass of your guys were on there. I mean, I remember Ashlyn Daly coming out to Zombie. I thought, I've never seen anything like this. Paddy, Holohan's entrance, unreal. Darren Till even had a good ovation, didn't he? Fought Nicholas Dalby, I remember, on the card. But I remember looking and thinking, Christ, if the Irish can do it, this was me as a young coach again, I'm sure we as a Welsh nation, we can start building on the back end. So I think your success, and I think we'll always say, inspired lots of the UK guys in particular to think, there's light at the end of that tunnel. We can do this. Do you agree?
And I think you have to credit Conor a lot because he was the first big champion, big name that kind of showed that you don't need to. You can make it with your original team. You don't need to be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Up in and leaving to America or to Russia to Europe. You don't need to be chasing the bigger teams with the bigger coaches to have all that success. But what I want, that's obviously I suppose in the space of 2-3 years, you've gone from obviously no one knows who Conor McGregor is to now he's probably one of the most recognizable people in the world. And I think a byproduct of that was. We seen it, like we said, with the IMAS and stuff, is how big the gym got, the SBG gym. I can imagine you went from, like you said, a couple of people on the mat to probably upwards of 100 people, something like that. How did you manage that as a coach in terms of, it's probably tough to keep an eye on 30, 40 guys, but then when you're trying to then run classes for 100 odd people and you've got guys visiting from you there and everywhere, and then, you've got to get bigger premises and all that factors in. How was that transition for you? Was it Was it an easy one, or I can imagine being a little bit stressful as well if you're anything like him?
I would say definitely a good problem. I'll always be happy with a busy mat. I suppose our kind of one thing that changed was, like, let's say you've got 3 pairs or 4 pairs on the mat and they're doing their rounds, and at the end, inevitably somebody will approach and say, "How did I do today? How did those rounds go?" And blah blah blah. You give a few words back. When you've got 20 pairs on the mat, 25 pairs on the mat, you're really just concerned about safety. So when someone would come up, "How did I do?" I'd say, "I have no idea," but nobody got their knee twisted today and nobody fell off the mat, so it just became like a safety thing. So I started realizing that I had to change how I did certain things. And one of the big ones we brought in was these simulation rounds. So yes, we do our group training, but then all the guys will book in one-on-one simulation rounds, so, and it's on them. I don't force them to do it, but I say, you come to me and say, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., you and Dave, you're doing 3 5s in the cage, and it'll be myself. I'll corner you. Dave Roach will corner the other guy, so we can give more accurate feedback. But for the group training, all I think is safety. Those horror stories. One guy's running a double leg.
Yeah, goes into someone's Achilles. We've seen it, haven't we? We've seen it.
Yeah, and touch wood. That's not happened in the last number of years. I kind of base a lot of that I'm doing things right, that our injury rate is approaching zero, which is fantastic. So try to keep the training. Obviously, you want the competitive atmosphere, you want a learning atmosphere, but sort of number one, make it safe. And then when with the one-on-one stuff, then we can kind of delve deeper into the technical side of things.
Okay. Question I want to ask as well. Obviously, you had all the success in the.
I like your socks.
You like them, man? These are Christmas presents.
Yeah. He
keeps telling me not to wear them on camera, but I am what I am, John. I'm an old fart.
I'm impressed your knees can move that way, so wave away.
2 knee operations deep with this as well. I can still triangle. You had lots of success with the UFC, and then obviously you were a massive force with Bellator. I mean, obviously now I just want to ask your thoughts really. PFL buying Bellator out. Where does that leave the landscape? What's your thoughts on this buyout and what the future is going to look like for PFL and Bellator?
That's a good question. And we've just ran through a spat of guys getting cut now that didn't make it over from the Bellator to PFL. Yeah. And we're going through a tough time right now. I'm not sugarcoating it for the guys. It's getting harder and harder to get fights. Yeah. But I have recognized this thing over the last 20 odd years that it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. So right now, it's probably going to be a quieter year for the guys. That being said, I just agreed 4 separate fights today for April for the PFL guys. So, there's still opportunities there, but it's leaner times. We went through a time of everybody. It just seemed to be a guy would be 1-0 and he was getting a well-paid Bellator contract that was brilliant. So enjoy the good times. Yeah. Now it's on leaner times, and we'll battle down the hatches and focus on development during this period, because I'm sure there'll be another up. And I don't get too stressed about where we are right now, because I just recognize this wave goes up and down. And I think credit Rory Singer. He said this to me many, many years ago. Different gyms go through different hot periods. All of a sudden you're everybody wants, you must be doing something different. Everybody wants to come by, and then another gym, they're having their time in the sun. And it just seems to be like that. It's a little bit cyclical. And I just tell my guys, all we can do is focus on today. Just, finish the session there earlier on and make that the best session you can, give all that you can. And sort of like tomorrow and next week will take care of itself.
I used to enjoy the Bellator. I remember doing the first one we done with them. I think the first one was with Brett, wasn't it? Yeah, it would have been with Brett. I remember coming back and feeding back to the other guys, like, if you'd stripped all the Bellator signage away and put UFC up, you wouldn't have thought you was in a different environment. The way they looked after you, the per diems, the training areas, the hotels, the running the event, I found them absolutely brilliant. I got to be honest. Yeah. Obviously, they don't have the following UFC have, but from a perspective, they were paying really well, good competitive fights. And as you said, giving opportunities. I mean, and again, what they done in Ireland, I thought was brilliant. We faced each other as coaches when Scott Pedersen fought Nathan Kelly in Dublin, and that atmosphere, like, even though it was hostile towards us when we came out, I enjoyed every second of it, because I love that. Yeah. I love that. And I remember coming home and, after UFC in 2015, and me and Jack saying, that's what I would love to get, a big event in Wales one day and mirror that. We're still
Still crying.
The closest we come was Jack in Cage Warriors, where it was like 4,500, 5,000 people at the Ice Arena sold out. But that's like the biggest venue really we've got at the moment.
Right.
But you know, I felt Bellator was a great. What's your thoughts on new organization
GFL.
GFL? Have you had any guys sign up with these?
I think I have. I know Dave Roach was dealing directly with Carl Prince about that.
Yeah.
He seems to have some involvement in the roster. I will say at the moment it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
I want to see it in action.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds great. Look, our job is training professional fighters. So the more promotions out there, the better.
Agreed.
And if GFL can deliver, amazing. And they've built it up now. They've put out some big promos, and they've got some big names. Let's see if they're show. You know, it'd be kind of a better one at the end of the year. Let's see if they put on a bunch of shows. Let's see
I
if
think it's
everybody
something
got
we'll
paid.
all reflect on at the end of the year, because I'm the same. Like Brett has signed, he's been drafted. We're in the Team London team. But I want that first fight out the way and the money in the bank for him before we start celebrating. Then and I'm not.
That's what I mean.
Fingers crossed, it's going to be a great organization. You know, if they follow through with all these promises, I think it'll be great for the sport. But I'm still a bit reserved. No one seems to know where the money's coming from, who's in charge. There's lots of different people that we're dealing with. But like I said, it's fingers crossed it'll be a good success, I think.
I will support her as much as I can.
Yeah, same here.
Who's the ones for everyone to keep an eye out for coming up at the minute, Johnny SB? Obviously, I'm a big fan of Kyron Clark. We fought in the IMAF at the same time, and I've sort of followed each other since. And I remember him first signing to Bellator. I think he was 1-0 or 2-0. Obviously, he's now, was he 10-0 now? I think
10-0, yeah.
What's next for him? Obviously, with Bellator disbanding, is he? Maybe you can't say, I don't know, but obviously with a record like 10-0 and coming from the gym he comes from, you know, I should imagine there'd be some good opportunities out there for him as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I'll say I'm in the dark. I don't have any not that I'm holding back. I just don't know at the moment. We're going through that period of. I'm like I said, as of today, I heard of a bunch of guys getting fights, and that's great. I didn't hear anything about everybody calls him Chiron, but Kieran. So
Kieran.
My bad.
That's how it's pronounced. But yeah, look, Kieran is a very, very dear to my heart. He's a great guy, great student, great person above all else. And I'd be very surprised if he's not brought into the PFL fold. He's done what's asked of him. He has a lot of stoppages. And you know, 10-0, you can't really deny that.
Listen,
as for other
madness
names,
if they don't. It's madness if they don't. You know, coming from your gym as well, the following that you guys got 10-0. There should be an abundance of organizations, pretty much, you know, coming up.
I hope so. I hope so. I never describe myself as a manager. I don't like that side of the business. I prefer just being on the mat and coaching and training. So I sort of let the managers take care of that, and I'll take care of just keeping them improving in the gym, and let's see what comes from, you know.
Any young amateurs on the scene that we need to keep an eye out on?
Yeah, so that's always a question I'm hesitant to answer, because it's almost like saying who's your favorite child, you know.
Yeah.
I'll say some names and then I'll forget a name, and then that person doesn't talk to me for a week.
I've also in the past I've said a name and I haven't seen him for 12 months.
Ryan Keogh, he just had a second win there. Actually, this was an interesting one, and it sort of made me think, what can we do in Ireland? And maybe it's something for you to think about as well. But so his pro debut, he lost a decision, and then he fought last weekend. And during the week, we were contacted by the French MMA Federation to say that his opponent had failed a drug test on the night. So he got that fight. He was made the winner of that. So he found out he was 1-0 on fight week, and then he won his fight. Now he's 2-0.
He's on a roll.
So he's on a roll now. 2 wins in 1 week. So it's something I'd love to do. I'm part of the IMA association in Ireland, and I'm going to talk to the guys about the feasibility of drug testing the pros, you know, because the novice pros, you know, they're obviously, we don't have the finance to put them in the, something like the USADA pool.
Yeah.
And I know testing on the night will only ever catch the most idiotic of a fighter, because unfortunately that's part of our game as well. People know how to do those type of things. But it's a deterrent, and in Ryan's case, the guy was caught. So it's something I'd like to see if I could bring into Ireland, that if you're a promotion and you're going to have a pro fight on your card, they should be tested.
Yeah,
I think that's a good shout as well, because we've seen it so many times over the years where guys are destroying it and killing it on the domestic and the European scene, and then they go to the UFC and they just look like a totally different fighter, without naming any names. And it's very much obviously down to the fact that they've probably been juicing for the last 4 or 5 years on the UK and the European circuit, and now they've gone into the USADA pool, or the whatever they're called now, the
drug-free sport.
That their performances take a rapid decline. So, like you said, it'd be a good deterrent in terms of, because I think there are a lot of young pros and even amateurs who are relying heavily on PEDs to kind of get them to where they need to go, without obviously acknowledging the fact that when I do get in, I can't take this. What's going to happen from you?
Yeah.
And I think that's it's sort of a learning curve, that it's kind of our job. Like, I think IMAF helped a lot with the weight side of things that they learned early on. You're not going to be able to cut massive amount of weights if you're fighting 3 days in a row. So get on top of that early. Don't be, piling on the weight, and then 4 weeks out from a fight, you're just killing yourself trying to make weight. You're sort of on weight all year round, and you're fighting closer to your, let's say, natural walking weight, which I think is great. That's a great positive. And this will be another thing that the 14, 15-year-olds coming up will see, that, oh, guys are getting caught on the local pro scene. So think about the psychological and physical damage you're going to do to yourself, that you're getting these wins where it doesn't really matter. And then all of a sudden you have to go pro. From a physical point of view, you're going to have a drop in performance, but even bigger than that will be the psychological point of view, that suddenly you don't have this thing, and that's going to be weighing on the back of your head. So I think it's almost a self-correcting thing, that as the teenagers coming up, they see, well, because we had a major problem with that in rugby in Ireland, that schoolboys rugby had a massive problem with steroids. And then they're becoming, whether playing professional. And I think it just took a couple of years for that to cycle out of the system, to see that that's not the way to go about it. And martial arts in particular is so technical. Like, are you best served doing that and just trying to lift heavier, or are you best served working on your trips on the fence?
Another one I wanted to touch on, obviously you've had massive amount of corner work experience in the UFC and Bellator. Is there a difference in nerves and maybe coach anxiety and pressure in terms of then a Conor McGregor and MSG compared to a guy who you've trained for 10 years fighting on the undercard? Do they all feel the same, or is there that extra sort of pressure that you feel as a coach when the stakes are raised, like a corner fight or a title fight, or does it all feel the same? You're there to do the job, and that's that.
Yeah. Like, I've kind of felt almost the same. Look, I won't lie. Of course, there's an extra buzz around a title fight or a main event for sure. But I found what's the difference in certainly my level, my anxiety levels would be whether I'm walking out a guy for his first amateur fight or it's a big pro fight, did we do the work? And I feel a hell of a lot calmer if I really know that the last 6 months was done right. And if I think this fight is one where, whether it's an injury or the guy didn't make those critical sessions and he's going out for a second amateur fight, I'm going to go in feeling a lot more anxious about that, saying, oh, if he doesn't get this done in the first 2 rounds, we're probably not going to be there. So that would be more what would cause me anxiety, as opposed to the magnitude of the fight.
Yeah, good answer. And, I'm the same with that. Like I always say to our guys, there is no shame in losing if you're not good enough. I'll take that all day, and I've never complained. Like, we've got a handful of fighters that have picked up losses, and I could not be proud of them because I know the work's been put in. But on the flip side, there's also been losses we've had which stick in my guts, if you know what I mean, because I know the kid has not put the work in, has missed sessions. I've had whispers that he was drinking 4 weeks before the event, these type of things. So I'm always the same. I get worked up, but But I agree with you. You know if the lads put the weight or the girls have put the work in, and you do feel a lot more comfortable, because I realize I myself think, win or lose, we can't have done no more, and I can live with that.
Yeah, like Nathan Kelly there last weekend. He had 11 fight win streak. He joined my team 0-2, and then he went 11 wins in a row. Very, very proud of that. And it's always heartbreaking to me, you know, when he lost the fight, he turned to me and he apologized. And I was like, don't ever fucking apologize to me. I know what you did these last number of years. Forget a 6-week training camp. I know how he's lived his life. I know the effort he puts in the gym. He gave it everything he had. He met a better man on the night. Zero shame in that.
Great fight as well. I enjoyed the fight. First round.
That back take. That's all we're drilling all this week now again, because that, like, when he dropped him with the elbow, Nathan is a very solid black belt. You show your back like that, he has a few rear naked choke finishes already. I hate to say this, but as he's charging towards him and taking us back, I'm already in my head celebrating. I'm already half walking towards the cage, and then his opponent did a really good job of defending that. Yeah. Eventually getting on top. Well, I was about to say I'll tell you privately, but I guess I'm telling more than that. But Nathan injured his shoulder early on the second and just kind of got stuck in a position, couldn't get out. But anyway, his opponent did a great job surviving that onslaught. But I will have sleepless nights about that back kick for a while.
Yeah, what do they say? It's a game of inches, isn't it? Game of inches.
Stop. Just give me a second. Highest highs and the lowest lows.
Yeah, it's spot on, that is, mate. And I say this to everybody. Everybody looks at the TV. So, for example, like, we use Conor as the ice pro. They see that moment where he's lifted the belt and it's everything. Everybody thinks it's bells and rainbow. But what they don't see is the torment and the injuries and the sacrifice and the arguments and the rows and the stress in that period of time leading up to it, and the years of work before that, But everybody sees the 15 minutes in the cage, but they don't see beyond that, do they? And I think you've got to be in our position sometimes to really appreciate what the fighter is going through on the day. Would you agree? We're back. He's talking
about money. Cut it off.
I said, cut him off. He's asking about money, but
yeah.
Right. Sorry, John. Pick up where you left off there, mate. We'll edit it back in properly then. Hang on, Jack.
Okay. So yeah, look, I suppose I'm wondering, do you start having similar conversations with guys and just saying, look, let's be honest here. If you fight for 10 years and you from beginning amateur to your final pro fight, if you add up all your money over that 10-year period, 15-year period, it's probably going to work out at not much above minimum wage for the vast majority of people. You'll get that 1% of 1% who have done very well, but I do try to get them early on to, you train, you've got your 3 or 4 hours training a day. So you do have a fair bit of time outside, and start thinking as early as possible, what could be next here?
Yeah, I always try and speak to the lads about education, don't I? And I always use Jack as an example. At 18, 19, he's telling me, I want to quit university, or I just want to... And for me, this is one of those sports, John, you could break a leg, it could be a severe injury, and you don't fight again. So you need a backup plan. So I always say about education, for those guys that maybe are not, what's the word I'm looking for, gifted then in as much as academically, I agree. I always try and source something out. I've spoken to a lot of the lads that have been on Bellator UFC about where we are from, property is cheap. Invest in a couple of houses, maybe, have a backup plan for when it comes to it. Because as we've seen with Bellator, we've seen this with Brett. Brett was in limbo for a while, wasn't he? Where his Bellator contract ran out. PFL bought them out 18 months in advance. We couldn't get a contract for love nor money anyway, and then we ended up with the PFL, thankfully. But yeah, it's such a short-lived, and as you said, you've probably got it worse than anybody. Everybody walks in, sees Conor in the gym, is like, I'm going to be the next guy, and they're all probably having the tattoos and the beard. But yeah, I think...
Yeah, I don't mind the tattoos and beard so much, but it's when someone's had their first pro fight and now they're wearing Gucci slides.
Yeah.
That's usually where you get brought into the office, like, you just have to spend 500 quid on a pair of flip-flops there. Like,
I try and keep them grounded, don't I? I think it's really important, because just like that, it can be over. We had a lad years ago, not a high-level pro, but like he'd done the safe MMA process. And after the brain scan, they said, listen, you've got an old injury on the brain that even like heading a football could end your life. And I was devastated for him. But fortunately for him, he had a trade, so he had a backup plan to get into. But yeah, totally, and it is tough. But, where we are from, work-wise, is nothing. Blaenau Gwent is the borough we live in. I don't want to put a sob story, but like we got the highest percentage of free school meals, highest percentage of child poverty in the area. So it is difficult. But you'll probably see it as well. Fighters are quite single-minded, and they've all got this self-belief that no, I am going to make it. But we do our best, and we try and educate these youngsters and guide them. Get a PT qualification. Try and get something, even if you want to remain in the sport, or if you're thinking about coaching, watch what the coaches do at the moment. Try and pick up the good traits off everybody. But it is tough, mate. And like I said, we've got there's so many stories. Look at also the guy off the Ultimate Fight, Stefan Bonner. How his world spiraled. Ended up with no money, and poor guy's dead now. We don't know what's around the corner, but how do you deal with it? What do you say to you guys?
No, it's echoing what you said there, and I think there's I hope it's not where you're from, but I do feel there's a bit here. Like it's almost like a dirty word saying get a trade, and I've so many friends that are printing money that are whether a carpenter or a plumber, and because no one's going into that, everybody thinks it has to be university, and that's for a very small number of people. That's probably like 5% of people, 10% of people will come out with a useful degree from university, not going and doing gender studies or something like that, but actually doing, coming out. Yeah, we're going to go there.
We're on our way now, Jack. Now the podcast's about to start.
But so I'm lucky that I have a couple of building guys that are in my gym, older guys that just train for whatever. And I push them towards them and say, go out and do a couple of weeks work with him and see what you think of it. Because I think the image maybe for you and I growing up, I grew up in building sites. My dad was a builder.
Yeah, same here.
It was really miserable, and it was dangerous. Things were falling to your head. Nowadays, it's done in a much better way. That the tools are better, the work environment's better, and you come out with a HVAC or you know how to fix a toilet. Yeah. You are not going to be short of work. So that's one I really push with the guys, is that you have time while you're doing this. And I'm kind of proud to say I have a couple of ex-fighters now that are carpenters, whether they're working for themselves or working for a business. But trying to get them a little bit sensible with their money early on, even if it's only they're fighting for 500 quid. And, I have a percentage I take. And if they get 100 quid, I get my percentage off them, because I want it. Not that I care about that side of it. It's more so to start learning that
about responsibility on the money. And
I think, you got a bit aside for your coaching and realize what you're actually getting out of this. Work it out over a year, work it out over a few years, and start to see early on that I think this sport gives you amazing networking opportunities. It really does. If you're going to promotions, you're there fight week, you're starting to talk to some of the heads of that promotion, and they see that you have a half a brain on you and that you have a certain work ethic and that you're not being a fucking arsehole for the week. All of a sudden, hey, would you be interested next week? And I know you don't have a fight coming up. Maybe you could help out with something as big as commentary would be amazing. But hey, setting up the cage, I see you're a bit handy with that type of thing. So start using those opportunities to network and start getting ready for the next phase.
And when you've got busy gyms like we've got, there's such a diverse group. Like we've got plumbers, we got bricklayers, we got plasterers, we got coppers, we got doctors, we got a barrister even. We've even got a barrister now. So if anybody gets in trouble, we just ring the barrister, Ben the barrister. Shout out to Ben.
But I have a busy barrister in my gym, trust me.
But I agree. I think you've got to have that little bit of a backup plan, because, great, if you make all the money in the world and you want to be a success, Jack's moving into the coaching with me now. He's really successful with PTs and but that comes with being somebody that's been an established UFC fighter and a former Cage Warriors world champion. That follows you. Not everybody's going to get that level, as you said. So you do need.
And I'm sure, Jack, you probably your mates probably think you're a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's always my.
I always say that it's my financial goal to have half the money that everybody thinks I
have. One last one just to finish off, John, before we go on. Obviously, thanks for the time again. Going back all those years ago when you was in the small gym, when you had the handful of guys, Connor, Pendred,
Chris Fields, Renee Ashland Daly.
Did it ever come into your head that in 10 years' time, you'd be in the corner opposite Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match.
I still don't think that happened. I don't really believe that happened. It was all a dream, as that song goes. Yeah, that fight will always be a strange one for me. There was weird things that stuck out for me. I remember I was in the corner, and even just the way they announced the fight was so different to a UFC fight.
Yeah.
You know, it was a lot more razzmatazz about that. You know, not obviously the UFC do a great job of buffer and all that, but it was different. And then one that really stuck out for me was end of round 1 was the bell they used, and I was like, oh, that's like a Rocky movie. You know, they use that kind of old fashioned bell. But yeah, to have at some obviously multiple times during the bout, Conor and Mayweather were in our corner exchanging blows, and I'm like, that's fucking Floyd Mayweather. Yeah,
no,
surreal.
What a memory, though. You know,
I don't know if you knew about the mouth guard incident with that fight. Did you ever hear about that?
No.
So it was there's a rule in boxing. The boxer has one job, and that he has to bring his mouthpiece. I have a boxing coach I work with here, and he always emphasizes that. Steve Collins, you remember Steve Collins?
Yeah, a massive fan of Steve Collins.
Oh yeah, as we all were. And his brother Packy, I'm very close with him, and he works with a few of my guys. So that's something he says. But anyway, we show up at the event, and you're not going to believe this, but Conor was quite late, so we're only getting in the locker room maybe 4 bouts before his, and starting to get our gear together, and we realize he's no mouthpiece, right? And it's like, oh shit. And I'm looking at the fight order, and I thought there were going to be quick ones, especially the one before was what's the guy's name? Deontay Davis, I think his name is.
Yeah,
Javante Davis,
like Javante Davis.
You know, and he was supposed to mow through his guy. So I'm working out in my head. We're up here in an hour probably, and it's about 45 minutes back to the house and 45 minutes back. So we're going to be half an hour late just getting a mouthpiece. And while all the commotion's going on, Conor is keeled over laughing about it all. He finds it hilarious that we're in a panic about his mouthpiece. Long story short, we send the driver back to the house, and he's battling Vegas traffic, and he's trying to come back, and the fights are starting to end, and the Deontay Davis fight starting, and we still don't even have a mouthpiece. And miraculously, the fight went, I think, 8 rounds or 9 rounds, which was a godsend. If he'd have knocked him out in the first round, I'm going to be that fucking idiot on TV explaining to a pay-per-view audience that we can't get going for about half an hour. So can you just play some music or play some old reels or a few ads? I don't know. But thankfully, the fight went quite long. Mouthpiece arrived just as we're walking. Mouthpiece in. Conor's in tears laughing about this. I'm losing hair, going grey, but it worked out.
Brilliant. One last one from me. Obviously, like you said, the experiences you've had is like, I think every aspiring coach would love to have even a tenth of the interactions you've had and the type of the big fights. What's your most memorable moment? Is it one that stands out? You think that's like so satisfying for you?
Probably the Eddie fight. That
Eddie
was,
Alvarez,
yeah. There's a few things. It's the first event in New York. It was just one of those things, you've had training camps that have their ups and downs, and it's just one of those ones where everything went right. It just couldn't have been better. It was Trump's first inauguration as well, but we'll leave that aside. We had plenty of protests outside our hotel during that time. My missus was there. We got I had not been to New York all that much, and we got everywhere we went. We had this cavalcade of 12 cop cars flashing the lights, driving down Fifth Avenue, and just many wonderful experiences fight week. And we went to the New York Athletic Club. That's where we did our training. That even getting in the door there was very cool. It's I'm not sure if you heard of it, a very well established rich person's gym. You're in the sauna and there's a Hollywood actor beside you, all of this kind of cool stuff. And then most importantly, the fight was just it's martial arts for a reason. It was just a beautiful fight. And you're always nervous about that first exchange, or again, the imposter syndrome. Is Eddie just going to take him down easily? And just the way Conor dealt with the first few shots, I was like, oh, we have this. This is.
I think for me, it was my favorite fight with him. I think. Would you agree? I just unreal performance. And as you said, then it must have been that moment. Like, I know we won the fight with Mendes and Aldo was something special, but as you said, moving up the weight to become the double champ, you must have sat back, you know, after the I don't know what your drink of choice is, but having an Irish whiskey, I'd have thought, proper 12. You probably got that on tap and thought, do you know what a journey this has been.
Yeah, and I think a big thing I like about it as well is that you could go your whole career coaching and never have one of those experiences. And I've been absolutely blessed, absolutely lucky to kind of get it done early. And I feel it's sort of freed me for the rest of my time that I'm involved in this circus, that I'm not massively stressed about those type of things, that I've sort of ticked a few boxes. I'm still very competitive. I still want my guys to do the best that they can do. But it is nice to sort of have that, you know, okay, now what are we doing? Okay, now I love the amateur scene. I love my Alta program. I love dealing with IMAF. I feel my fighters panic every time I say this, but I am being honest. I feel I'll eventually leave the pro scene completely and just focus on the amateur scene. I think there's so much you get out of the amateur scene now, and IMAF have done an incredible job. You know, I love going away with the team, and you've all got your tracksuits on, and you see the kids meeting kids from other parts of the world, other religions, other cultures, and that to me is what sport is about. And I like I said, my guys don't like me talking like this, but there is a time limit for the pro scene. But I know I'll be taken out of my gym in a box because I'll be involved in the amateur scene and in the quote unquote casual training until the day I die.
Yeah, you and me. I think that's a good part to finish on. So, John, can't thank you enough, mate. I know how busy you are. It's been an honor to have you on, and I've really enjoyed it. It's flown by that last hour. Just thank you very much, mate, and good luck moving forward.
Thanks very much, and I just want to apologize again for being so late. I crucify my guys for being late. I have it. Sort of
Let me tell you,
ADHD
if you'd been a
thing when
student,
it hits
if you'd been
11
a student
a.m.,
today coming into a session, you know what you'd have done in my gym? You'd have hit the bag for an hour. If they turn up late,
you know what?
Hit the bag for an
hour.
hour.
On that, I'm gonna go out and do my hour in the bag. So I deserve that.
Right. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Cheers, pal.